We're happy that you're all here. I think that you are going to have a very fabulous morning. You're going to learn a lot about your Greenwich Public School teachers and what they do with your children. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce Ms. Irene Parisi and our fabulous panel.
Thank you, Ann. Yes, Irene Parisi, the Chief Academic Officer for the district. And I do want to thank first Mimi, Anna, and Jessica for helping to organize this, because I've been going back and forth. Like, is this the way we want to do this? Can we do this? And so on. So I appreciate you coming over to get coming into this bigger space and helping to organize some of the questions so that we can certainly make sure that we try to answer those questions. And Brian Pildunas and Cricket Diamond as well for constantly meeting with me and talking through the work, because as I said before, we all have something in common and we want what's absolutely best for all of our learners in Greenwich Public Schools, and that begins in pre-K all the way through 12. And one of those ongoing questions is, how are we making learning personal? Or even, how do we go from personalized learning to making learning personal, or personal learning? And it has been a journey, it has been an evolution, and we learn more every single year, and I think even in the work of it, you learn more every single day, because it goes live with our kiddos. So one of the asks was, it's one thing for me to tell you about personal learning in our district, and I'm very passionate about it, I believe in it, and I value it, and I try to help build that support structure. But it's another thing to hear from our teachers, right? Our teacher colleagues across the district. So that's why they've been assembled here. I also want to, and there are partners, right? There are partners in learning just as you are. The same is for our building principals, so we have some present as well. So Tom Healy from Central Middle School, principal there, representing his team, and actually one of his teachers are here to speak to the work that they're doing at Central and across all middle schools. Mark DAmico, principal at Glenville School, who really has tried to create a lot of innovation spaces throughout his school and really bolster that idea of that mindset of risk-taking. Let's take that risk and let's see what happens. And Jen Bensavengo, principal of Old Greenwich School, who also, once she took the leadership role at Old Greenwich, like, how can we get on board? What more can we do? How do we get this message out there, and how do we help our teachers? So, I do want to introduce our panel, and I'm actually going to do the introductions because it's an honor for me to speak on behalf of each person. So I'm going to start at the end, because hopefully you'll realize the method to my madness. So Jen DiCarlo is a kindergarten teacher at Old Greenwich School. And Jen had, when I first entered her classroom and I saw her kindergarten space, it was inspired. And she had shared with me, and yes, I'm going to give dirty details, but she had shared with me how after a school year, she's like, there's got to be another way. There has to be another way to do this. And she totally transformed and reimagined her classroom so that her learners could have true voice, have choice, and really develop. Those young minds can really develop and grow in their independence. And she helps facilitate that. And if you want to see an amazing kindergarten classroom and these kiddos in action, definitely visit Jen DiCarlo's classroom. But I always learn something new every single time I visit Jen. Next we have Vicki Kapp, who is from North Street School, kindergarten teacher, and I've been in her room multiple times, and again, I'm always amazed about how she creates the these independent learners. I was blown away how goal setting was actually happening with kindergartners, right? And that students can articulate, here's what I know my strengths are in mathematics, and here's what I'm working on. And my dad says I need to work on it too, because he agrees that this is a challenge for me. So here are my goals, and here's the work that I'm doing, whether they were working offline or online. And most recently, the way she managed the classroom to still have choice and voice and independence through working through foundation. So again, it's always an amazing experience when I enter into your classroom. Then I learned in Dr. Elizabeth Manning's classroom, who's first grade at North Street School, that actually they started together as a partnership, and when Elizabeth went to first grade this year, there was this kind of lead, right? Taking what we know about personal learning into grade 1, and that you still continue to partner. And when I was in Elizabeth's classroom, again, this idea of independence and self-regulation. This was amazing to see with first graders. And the one thing that really I took away, and I've been sharing across K-12, is that these first graders, what we want to know is, can they self-advocate when they need something? When they need more information, can they stop for a moment and say, here's what I need if I'm going to be successful? They may not be saying it that way, but they know they need more. And you have designed this mechanism with these dinosaur plaques that the minute they take that plaque, they can show you and advocate for themselves if they need some support or they have a question. And there's 3 of those plaques, dinosaur shapes, you know, and then they know that they're waiting for you, you're waiting for them, and that you can respond to them. And once they get what they need, they return the plaque to that spot that is kind of co-created. And just having that, it seems minimal, but it is powerful because these students are developing these self-advocacy skills and just the workflow of the classroom, so really impressive. Sandra Grandinetti has been a partner for many years now, and she was part of our pilot for mathematics for elementary at 3rd grade at Julian Curtis. And she actually had the opportunity, based on what we've learned, she looped with her kiddos to 4th grade, and now you're 4th grade at Julian Curtis. And Sandra was one, much like a child, she was a sponge. She took it all in, and she's like, I need to know more. This is really messy. I'm uncomfortable, but I want to know more, and how can I do this in a new and different way, and totally reimagined her classroom. She was one of the first ones to really reimagine the space and say, I want to try this out and try that out. And really doing a lot with station rotation and learning targets, really articulating the learning target for our learners and getting the students to also own it and articulate it and be self-advocates. And based on that work, she had the opportunity to represent Greenwich Public Schools in Australia with Mary O'Connor, and they went and spoke at an international conference on how to personalize learning in mathematics. So, very impressive conference. Michele Bukzan is an advocate for her classroom and Cobb School. She's a 3rd grade teacher there. And again, always amazed by her energy, her passion, and her shoe sense. We have that partnership.
Thank you.
But again, always taking in the playbook and how can I do this in different ways, and finding partners within Cobb and how to share up and out. And then most recently advocating for her classroom. We held a mini Shark Tank competition last year because she said also, I want to reimagine my space in the classroom because it's one thing about the instruction and the voice and the choice, but I need the space to actually do that type of learning in. So fortunately, we're finally starting to get the furniture in, so some new things happening for the kiddos. But recently, being in her classroom, again, the idea of goal setting. Students knew who they were, what they were doing, and who they were as a learner, and then here's what I'm going to do about it. Here's the work that I'm doing, and knowing when to partner with their teacher. Deirdre Burke, a physical education specialist at Glenville Elementary School, and again, huge fan, but early on stood out as someone that, this is a tough space, a gymnasium, and physical education is a tough content. How do I personalize? Well, she heard the call, and she has done that in so many ways to really help students understand who they are, about being healthy and mindful and physically active and mentally healthy, and doing goal setting. And really, the kids have a voice all the way through K-5. It is amazing to see how they interact with you and with physical education. And recently, we were able to do a lesson together. She raised her hand and said, hey, Irene, Chief Academic Officer, who does that? Come into my classroom because I want to do a lesson with you. I want to really personalize learn. Let's try something new, and we did. So maybe that's something you'll think about. Kate Brzezinski at Central Middle School, science teacher. She really was one of the, took that space, the different spaces throughout Central Middle School, the innovation space, the launch pad, and utilized, and really tried to create space in science for these students to really develop into themselves, even if they didn't think they liked science or knew that they were a scientist. And she was one of the first ones to really start to use virtual reality in the classroom to really open up even more spaces and take down the walls for those learners. But I've been able to interact with her students in the moment, and you had a comprehensive group in those classrooms, but these students really took to it. They realized their passion in science. They found a way to create. They found a way to have a voice and share up and out. And even many times, I'm like, you have to get together with Mr. Bramante. These kids just really need to speak to him because they're coming. And she's growing those kids. Deb Smith has been in Greenwich Public Schools for many years, but as an English teacher, it's hard at the high school, right? There's a lot of demands, a lot that we expect of our learners as writers. But what we've been seeing is, again, empowering them to be self-advocates, to be self-reflective, to build that self-awareness in their writing as writers. And she's making it happen. The space is small. Those classrooms at the high school are rather small, but she has the students conferring with each other, with herself. She's utilizing the hallway. So again, creating that space for these students to really stretch and have a voice and choice in how they write, how they develop as writers, how they communicate that message. And she's stretching herself as well, because again, you had a big class. You had about 28 kids in there, and we were really stretching. And Katelyn Shebina, also at the high school. I have never been so fascinated watching medieval literature, and the buzz in the classroom was amazing. That's what you want with our teenagers. And the buzz was all literature-based. They weren't having little side conversations about who they're going to hang out with later. We'll leave it at that. But the idea, the structures that were put in place for students to create norms for themselves within their groups, to have these deep conversations about literature, it was across multiple texts, and to feel safe. I mean, that's what we want for them, and you've created that space for them, and it continues to grow. And so thank you for doing that. And certainly Andrew Bramante has been known nationally, internationally for his self-directed science research program at the high school. And I've learned so much from Andy and what he does to get out of the kids, because I'm still trying to harness that too. How do we get that out of the students and cultivate that? And a lot of that is the relationships that you build, that Andy builds with his learners, because those students are really self-directed. They have to know thyself in order to create what they create, and really developing solutions for the greater good, which is within Greenwich, beyond Greenwich, and all over the world. So thank you. So these are my colleagues that I'm honored to call my colleagues and to learn and work with. And I hope that we can answer some of those questions that you have. And in order to do that, to make sure we use our time very wisely, I have some of the questions. I'll moderate those questions. But you have index cards on your chair that you can certainly write down questions. So Ann, maybe Anna, Jessica, Mimi can collect them and bring them up, and we'll try to cycle through some of them, but I do have the questions on our list as well. Before I forget, we do have some program coordinators in the room too that are part of this work and part of the structure of Greenwich Public Schools to make learning personal. So Sheila Saval, our STEM program coordinator, and Bob Hipson, our library media services programmer. We're all behind the scenes helping to make this work too. So we get into the nitty-gritty so that they can make this happen in the classrooms. Before we start with some of the questions, I do want to bring your attention to just a new tool, new resource. On your chair, there is a little infographic that you can take with you. And this is just making learning personal impact. We've been working toward making learning personal, and this goes back to one of the questions that was shared. It was homegrown, and it came organically from strategic planning and that committee work with Dr. McCursey, and we said, if we are going to increase the achievement and provide opportunities for students to achieve their optimal growth, then we need to personalize learning, and let's do that through developing the capacities and the vision of the graduates. That's why they're coupled together. So the definition, there was an ask about the PL definition, is right at the top. That is the district definition. And there was a slight modification under Dr. Korda when Dr. Korda arrived, but he worked with the board and us to say, well, how else can we make sure that this is the right definition for all of us to support us in that process. So the board ultimately adopted and accepted the definition in 2016, and this has been our district definition since. And if you read through it, we're speaking it, we're living it, about choice, about voice, at students' pace, when it's appropriate, and still anchored in a standards-based curriculum moving forward. But we really do try to understand a child's needs, their motivations, their interests, and cultural backgrounds. So that is our district definition. Also on here is just to give you some averages, again, that impact. What have we been doing in our growth across the key core academic areas, and what have we been doing? On the back side, this was part of the questions presented. We've been living in this process, a facilitated process. We are committed to being partners in learning, cultivating those deep relationships with our learners. And that might mean that, yes, we're putting data, the students' personal data and information about them as a learner in their hands, and co-creating and having those discussions like conferring. We want them to own the curriculum, so we, with the program coordinators, are really trying to make the curriculum as flexible as possible so that it can grow and move with how the classrooms are growing and moving. And that does include a standards-based curriculum that we're committed to, but it also includes a portfolio of resources that we provide for the district, which speaks to the 75+ digital tools that we provide And Bob is our data privacy guru. He manages all of that to make sure that we are compliant, or they are actually compliant with us. And so that becomes part of that blended learning environment. Self-regulation is a big one for us. We really do need all of us to be self-aware and self-regulating so that students can say, I need more, I need help, or I need to talk to an expert in the field, or I'm almost there and I need additional resources to help me. And then we help them figure out how are they going to develop that solution. We're always progress monitoring because we want to know how is this working for us, so that within this cycle there's always going to be some measures and to understand where they are in this learning plan, and we might have to refine that learning plan, which might mean changing the structure if it's more physical resources, digital resources, or even the human resources that they have to interact with. All of this develops student agency so that they can know themselves and they develop perseverance. We've been talking about that a lot across the district, the idea of resilience and taking initiative to do more. And as that comes back up in the process, we ask ourselves again, how is it going for us? How's that working for you? Do we need to refine that plan? So this is an ongoing process that we live in daily, and that's what we're committed to. So that helps to answer some of the questions, but you can take this away with you. This is part of the work that we're doing. So with that, I've done a lot of talking. I'm going to have you all do some talking. And initially, I think it would be helpful to start at K, and we'll go through 12. And just tell us, how do you feel about personalized learning? So we'll start with you, Jen.
I love personalized learning. I honestly was very hesitant to implement it, but like Irene said, I looked around and there had to be a different way to make this more meaningful for the students. And since implementing it full force last year, it has changed their learning. It has changed their commitment to the community and to what they're doing. It has really transformed my teaching, and I think it's a different attitude that we're all going into school with every day, and it's a lot more fun, and I think much more meaningful than the way I have been teaching.
And I think part of that is because, especially at the kindergarten level, 5-year-olds love to talk, and they love to share their stories, and they have a lot of that personal interest, and if you can tie that into what they're learning and give it an everyday application, they're more readily absorbing it, and they're more invested in that. So giving them that choice and hearing their own voices helps us to then provide the scaffolding curriculum that they might need.
And then popcorn from Vicki, who started me in this. I walked into her classroom one day, knew that she was working on this model, but really wanted to see how it looked. And I said, I need a piece of this, because I could see how engaged the children were, and how happy they were, and very responsive to the model she was using. And Vicki chose to use station rotation as her model to implement the process, which I learned from her. And after I learned it and applied it in kindergarten, the next year I was punted to first grade, and I said, oh dear, what do I do? Is this going to work? And I said, of course it's going to work. I had to retool it and tweak it a bit, but just as effective, if not more. I started in mathematics, and I'll kind of describe how it looks in first grade and similar in kindergarten. I set it up in 4 different stations. The first station is called the teacher's station, and this is where I meet in small groups with every child every day, and it's beautiful because that's where the personal learning really perks, because they're feeling much more in touch with me. I get to know them as people and as learners so finitely in a very short amount of time because of that relationship we're building.
And partly because it's a small group, right?
Yes.
So you're able to really engage with those learners.
Yeah, and they're not intimidated to talk, as Vicki said. In first grade, they're very similar. And in the small group, they let their shoulders down even more, and they really engage. The next station is called independent practice. After I've met with them, and the purpose of the teacher's station is to, after I've taught my mini lesson for about 10 to 12 minutes, which is a very limited, targeted, skill-based lesson, on a very few minute topic. They then come to me and I pull them off the carpet. The children that I pull are usually the ones at the mini lesson who look a little intimidated by it or aren't engaging in the partner talk. You instinctively kind of know who they are, and they kind of let you know who they are. So they're the ones that I would invite over to the teacher table right away to get right back into it. The next station is called the independent practice. This is where the children go, who I pick out, who appear in the mini lesson to be very confident. The ones that, I got this, just by their reaction, response, you also know who they are. And they'll go over right away and practice a problem set in math, or demonstrate that strategy in their independent reading books. And they're engaged with each other in a small group, punting against and with each other, and engaging in the practice. Another table is called the technology table, and this is where I define a particular set of learning goals with a choice menu. The children then can engage in that topic in technology. And in first grade, in the writing workshop, it probably is Raz Kids or Lexia, if they apply. In a math workshop, it's probably ST Math, or it's IXL Math. And we define particular items that we want them to do. But on a choice board, which is displayed right on their table in their station, they have choices within that menu. So therefore, their learning becomes personalized, and they learn to select what they like or instinctively need. You'll see some of them go to the same thing every day for days. That's because they need it, and they're enjoying it. The minute they say, I've got this, they're not going to stay with it. They're going to explore something else. Other children will head for the hardest thing first, because they instinctively know that's what they love, and they'll get that opportunity. So they really get very good, as Irene said, in self-regulating based on desire, needs, and personal goals. The last table, if you ask the children their favorite, this is the one. We call it games. What it really is hand-on manipulative. This is where they'll do their words their way, their sorting, their spelling patterns, which are visualized. Or we may pull out specific games, say in a math workshop, where they're using manipulatives and games to reinforce what they practice. And then, of course, every 10 to 12 minutes, they'll spin around, and they'll all pass by my station every single day. And that's where I can really enjoy them. And then we end with a closing lesson at the end of station rotation, where they do most of the talking, and they tell me what they were about. And usually, they're very engaged, and they're right on. So I'm convinced. Of all the models I've ever used in my many years of teaching, this is my favorite by far because of the personalized learning that comes out of it. Sandra?
Wow. Well, when I began this personalized learning journey, which we've since just switched to making learning personal for the students 3 years ago, I happen to have this perfect gem of a class of students that from day one, I asked them to work with me to help us figure out what's the best way to learn. We started it in math. What's the best way to learn math? What is important to you? What do you like? What don't you like? And I had a very honest group of students that from day one would say, this doesn't work for me. I can't do this. I prefer this. And we really worked hard in our classroom. And I say we, the students and I worked together to make it the best possible math rotation it could be, math class that it could be. We focused a lot, and I still do, on the standards of mathematical practice, which are a foundation of what they should do, what kind of abilities they should have. Should they persevere? Can they use different tools? Can they use different resources? Do they see patterns in what they're learning? Can they make a connection to what they've learned prior to what they're learning now, and how can that move them forward? And one of the most important aspects is the perseverance, because generally we would see that students, if they would say, well, I don't get it, immediately they would give up. But we did a lot of work with growth mindset and how even making mistakes helps your brain to grow and learn. And what we wound up doing in that class is each child would say, I need to work on this because I know that I don't persevere. I know that I don't check my work back.
So that's how we do our goal setting against the standards of mathematical practice. The students we had, instead of rotations, each student had a playlist, which is sort of like an online, sort of like on your phone, what's your favorite playlist? Do you need a playlist to go running? Do you need a playlist to meditate? Do you need a playlist to cook dinner and you just want to have background music? And the playlist offered them different paper activities, different games that they could play, different technology tools that they could use to practice their skill. Many times from that first time with that class, I never taught a whole group mini lesson. I would pick different groups at different times and teach the lesson of the skill that we were working on that day, the strategy we were working on that day. And before the children went off to complete independent work or whatever their next station, I would say to them, do you think you understand this now, or would you like to stay for the next lesson? And sometimes they would stay, sometimes they would go, but they knew that they didn't feel as if they were looked upon negatively if they wanted to take the lesson a second time. Sometimes I would coax them to stay, sometimes they would make that choice on their own. And as the year progressed, they began to have more and more ownership of what they were doing in math class, and they just bloomed and grew. And the best part of that year was when I was able to tell them that I was also going with them to 4th grade, and that was the highlight of that was one of the days that I will never forget as a teacher. And working with them the following year, from day one, they knew what they had to do. They just knew it was going to be, okay, now we're in 4th grade, let's keep going. And it was the best. I want to loop again.
That honestly was the best experience of my life as well, is looping from 2nd to 3rd. You just, day one, you are continuing where you left off. Parents know what your expectations are, students know, and you know how every student works, and that was a great experience for me as well. The hardest part about, I feel like, personalized learning was for just teachers in general to understand the difference between differentiation and personalized learning. I think that sometimes gets confused, where differentiation is just teacher-directed, and personalized learning is so much more with the students. A lot of what Sandra said I do as well. There's 2 stations in my room for math and for the reading and the writing for literacy. And it's been so fantastic for students to really feel like they have a place and they feel that I know them very well. I feel like they have a say in what they're learning and that they take ownership of that. We do lots of reflections. Students get to really reflect on what they've learned, what was hard, what was easy for them, where they feel like they need to be going next. The playlists have been amazing for 3rd grade. They are able to, in our technology section, they're able to get on and totally go with what they want. There's so much exploring to do that they never thought could be possible, and they're learning so much from that, and not thinking they think it's just fun time, and they're learning so much. They're coming away with constant reflection of, this is what I learned, I can't believe this really surprised me. Really being able to have conversations with each other about what was important, what they found was important, and where they're going from there. It's been wonderful to have these goals like constantly changing for them. As they feel like they meet a goal, they switch and do something else. I mean, it's just a very fluid place to be in my room, where they're feeling like they're not stagnant, they're constantly changing and evolving and progressing in 3rd grade. And it's so fun for them to feel like, this is where I need to be, I know it, and this is my goal every day, no matter if I'm in multiplication or division, or if I'm trying to do problem solving, that this is the goal that I'm working on. And the excitement that they feel when they've crushed that goal is beyond words of how exciting they are. And they know that they've done it on their own, and they've taken ownership of that. That's something that I cannot give them, that's something they own. And it's hard for them to see that at first until they feel it for that first time, and that's where the confidence begins to build, because that transition from 2nd to 3rd is such a huge independence year that I give them that safe feeling in the classroom that I know you can do it, using a lot of what you said too, the I can statements, and that growth mindset of, okay, you can't do this yet, but you will. And it's something that you are working on. So we do a lot of that mindset of, you can't say I can't, but maybe you can't right now, but that's a goal for you for the future. And so that's really transform my classroom, as well as the space. And thank you to Irene for getting, we have pedal desks in our room. We've got some standing tables. They think they're at a cafe. They'll stand. I've got really low tables. They'll either kneel or there's little cushions. And then we've got the regular standard tables, and students can totally choose on what they're doing during the day, where they want to stand, where they want to sit, if they want to go out in the hallway. So they have the choice and voice in the classroom, and it's made a world of difference.
I believe that personalization of learning really starts just with relationships and getting to know our students, and what better place than the gym to get to know our kids. Watching the way they interact with their peers, watching the way they react to wins and losses. It's a great way for me to get to know the students. Irene and I this year, Irene coached me through a student interest survey that I pushed out to all the students to really get to know them as learners. I think in PE it's important for me to know how do these kids learn in the classroom as well, so I can support them. And I realized personalized learning, it's not just for the classroom, it really should happen in PE. And by adopting personalized learning, I want you to think of your student and the first time they ever scored a basket or shot a soccer goal or danced in a recital, that feeling of success and confidence. Through personalized learning, I get to give that feeling to all kids in their own unique way. So I love personalized learning, and I think the strongest characteristic of it would be partners in learning. I feel so comfortable with all of my colleagues, my administrators, chief academic officer. I feel safe to take risks in my classroom, which is the gym. And the kids see that, and I feel that they know I'm their partner. They can take risks with me. They can fail and learn from those failures, which I tell them all the time is failing is more important than winning, because that's how we learn from our failures. So I believe in personalized learning.
So personalized learning makes much more sense than you would think. In this room right now, we have so many different people with different strengths and think differently, and we all learn in different ways because of that, and show that in different ways because of that. The same applies to your kids. They're different people, they think in different ways. So personalized learning really lets the teacher sit down with your child and get to know them, who they are, and help them grow into a stronger person. Learn and master skills that will help them be successful in high school, in college, and in a job as well. So I really think it helps the individual grow to be a strong person in the future. So I really am in support of it.
I agree with so much of what has been said, and it's really a treat for me as a high school teacher to hear what's going on in elementary school, middle school, because I tend to stay in my own high school corner. I have friends who are in all working in different fields. You know, some are college professors, some are leaders in business, and they know that I'm a high school teacher, and sometimes they'll say to me, oh my gosh, I'm finding that these newly minted college graduates, so many of them are so dependent. I'll give them a project and they'll say, well, how do you want me to do this? And where do you think I should start? And I don't know what resources to tap. And they said, you know, what's going on and what are you doing to address this? So I do think personalized learning is an important piece of that, because as so many have said, students feel more empowered. They know themselves, and they know how to proceed with something. So I do think we don't know what many 21st century jobs will look like. We have the challenge of preparing students for that unknown, but we do know that we need students who know how to collaborate. We need students who know themselves. They know their strengths and they know their weaknesses. I know that in business schools, for example, one of the most important principles they try to convey to these future business leaders is you need to know yourself and your strengths so you can surround yourself with people who complement those strengths, who are maybe stronger in areas where you're weaker. And we all know children are no different from us. We know if we go to a restaurant and we like to look at the menu and we like to choose what we're in the mood for that particular day. And students are no different. And the other day I pulled out a unit that I hadn't taught in several years. And I thought, okay, well this is ready to go. I won't have to do. And I looked at it, and it was so different. I teach so differently now than I did even 4 or 5 years ago. So I thought, wow, it was good. There was a lot about it that was very good. But I could see that I was adhering to that top-down model where the student is the empty vessel, and I'm the expert, and I was going to fill them with all of this knowledge. And that's just really not the way we're rolling anymore. So when I plan really any activity, any lesson, any unit, and really planning my whole year, it's very, very different. I start with choice. I can't, even there is choice, even in realms where students feel like they don't have much choice. For example, they have to take the SAT, which is as standardized as it comes, right? But even there, you can say, no, wait a second, you actually do have some choices here. Are you going to tackle the tough passage first? Are you the person who likes to sort of get at that and get at that when you have the most energy? Or do you need to warm up with a passage that's a little easier and more accessible and more contemporary? So there's choice there. Or for multiple choice, for example, are you somebody who benefits from reading all the questions first? Well, then do that. Or are you somebody who gets confused by that? So there are actually all of these small choices that they can make in all kinds of situations that serve them. I could talk for a long time. I'll stop there. Hopefully I'll have another chance.
I'd like to just add on to what Deb said, because I teach high school English as well, so I'm seeing the same thing, and I feel the same way that you do, Deb, because we are really preoccupied with the college process, especially at the junior and senior level, which are the primary levels that I teach. And I'm so happy to be here because there's so much excitement and there's so much joy that's going on in your classrooms.
Yes, very cool.
And not to say that there's no excitement and joy in high school, but there's a preoccupation. College is, a naughty C word in our what we're doing, and it's an extraordinary stressor, and the students have this preoccupation that they need to market themselves in a certain way. They have to get perfect grades. They have to build that resume so that they stand out against a group of peers and get into the perfect college. And a lot of students don't get the opportunity to really explore classes that are interesting to them. I teach a medieval literature class, and I always congratulate the students on the first day. I'm like, what are you doing here? I was like, just clarify, it's not, we're not going to be reading Game of Thrones or playing Dungeons and Dragons, but there's choice in what classes the students take at the high school, so that does lend itself very well to personalized learning, but when they get there, it's making the grade. And I think that the structure of personalization, again, it has changed the way that I approach my units, and yes, I mean the literature of medieval, it's not changing at all, but the way that I approach it is completely different. I was talking to Tom Healy, I became a parent last year, and now you're dealing with humans, you're dealing with completely emotional and irrational and arbitrary beings, and it's to have students be aware of their own emotions and their own interests, and to teach them that they are, and personalization implies individualism, but personalization kind of teaches the kids that you are not in a vacuum as a learner. You are a part of a larger community, and right now is your chance to learn how you learn, what you like to learn. So you're not just marketing yourselves for a particular school or a particular job, but you're building skills that will help you as you go on in life. You are a lifelong learner. You're going to be interacting with text for the rest of your life, and you need to learn how to think, and you need to learn how to ask questions so that your life becomes more fulfilling, and it's not just, okay, what do I need to do in order to get to this step? It's how do you help yourself? And also I think that personalization and the choice and ownership is bringing back a lot of that fun and that excitement, so that students learn and understand. You don't need to just measure your success by how you did on the test or the letter number grade you got on the essay. It's that feeling of fulfillment. Did I learn something? Did I work together with my classmates and my teachers, and am I walking away with a feeling of gratitude for what I accomplished today?
Hi. First of all, I'd like to thank all of you guys because I've learned so much. You know, like the other high school teachers here, you know, you kind of live in a small bubble in a high school, but clearly what I'm seeing in this research classroom, the skills, the creativity, the imagination starts much younger. So thank you guys. So personalized learning and research. Let me just give you an idea of how this class runs. I mean, basically it is totally student-driven. I mean, to get into the classroom, each year there's about 50 kids in the class, spread out in 3 sections. And the kids have to apply to get into the classroom, and that application process is a research proposal that is driven by their own interests. So basically those are combed through, and essentially the kids, you can immediately see those kids that are writing from the gut, writing from from their imagination versus those that are just writing for the sake of writing. So once the kids are selected to take the class, generally speaking, the research projects take about a year to complete, and they are totally student-driven. So the ideas come from the student, the design of the experimentation comes from the student, and all of that basically is, the way I guide the kids is they are looking at things that are happening around them, so not just in the community, but all over the world. What are the problems that we face both in, in science and math, and how can, a creative set of eyes, I always tell the kids they're high schoolers, and they don't have the bias that we adults have. We think we know exactly how to do everything and how to get things done. They have a totally different outlook, so they look at things differently, and they look at things with a lot of imagination, creativity, and they roll down this path of basically bumping into walls, bumping into, conflicts, things that don't work out, and essentially maneuver it through until they get to the goals that they've set up, usually by February and March. So it is quite personalized. As they maneuver, we talk about things that are, that are happening, but the onus is on them to really come up with a solution. So how is, you've heard about the program, you've heard about the successes, and people often ask me, why are your kids so successful? And I firmly believe that that is the reason. It's not because, we give them the opportunity to fail, we give them the opportunity to think, and it's basically a separate time where they can devote to this whole process. And they start it and they finish it, and it's not under the guise of some, researcher that has bigger plans and then they sort of fit theirs into it. So that's one measure of success. For me, the measure of success is really about getting kids passionate about something that they believe in. Just to give you a couple of snippets of things that have been happening. You may have heard about, last year we had a big, one of the bigger projects was by a student that was a honeybee grower. And the idea was these honeybees are being attacked by varroa mites, and this gal had discovered through a symposium that she went to that the mites are basically pulling the liver out of the bees, and that liver is what gives them the ability to fly, to fight off pesticides, all the functions that basically are happening when you have colony collapse, when they start disappearing. So it's really not the pesticides, it's more the mite. So this gal devised an entranceway where as the bee passes through, this material rubs onto the bee and starts to pull off the mites, and so great story, she ended up patenting it, but the idea that I wanted to leave you with for this one is there was a point in time where she had to model the bees passing in and out of that holder and then flying around, for their 20 trips a day, 6 hours a day. So she came to me and she says, Mr. Monty, how about we use one of these little drones that you can buy at Radio Shack? And we model basically the space of the bee wing, and then we sort of change the speed of the drone wing so that we can mimic this 6 hours of flight, each day. And so that's how she created this model to basically show that in about 3 to 4 days, the concentration of this material that sits on the bee is adequate to kill the mites. So it was really kind of cool. Just to finish that story, she has people all over the country trying these holders so that she can finish off this patent, which is really pretty slick. And it really starts on the other end of the table. It does. That's how this all gets going. One more story I can give you, because I could, like all the others, I can talk about.
But I know you have class at 12, so I want to...
That was my buffer.
Plus you like it here.
Yeah. idea of how the opportunity kids are given, I also teach an ESL class, and so I had a lot of kids in there that are from all over the planet, right? And one student in particular just watched this girl, Raina, with her honeybee project float in and out of the room, and he came to me and he said, you know, Mr. B, my family are coffee growers, and there's a coffee, it's called coffee rust, and it's basically a fungus that gets underneath the plant and goes through the little holes called stomatas, and it basically ruptures the plant and causes billions of dollars in damage for these people. And now he's basically taking on that and is already pretty successful in using copper nanoparticles to basically disrupt a fungus just like it. And so this is something that's never been done before. We're working with people up in the agricultural station to do this. So here's a student that didn't have research, didn't have science on his radar, and just from sitting there and seeing and thinking about things that he was concerned about, things that his parents had lived through, is now he's going to be the person to fix it. So, you know, in summary, you know, what does this class give kids? It gives them the ability to think, articulate, imagine, and they go into all walks of life. It's not just about science. You know, I have kids that have gone to law school, business, you know, medical school. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I was getting a White House tour by one of my students from years ago, and he works for a security council. Oh my God, you know, we had a part of this. You know? This is cool. You know, so anyway, I hope that gives you a little flavor of what the research does, you know, what the class does in terms of finishing my feeling this story, you know, regardless of what the kids are going into after high school.
Thank you for that. So part of that, there's a lot of questions emerging and some similar questions. So one of them, and really anyone can start the conversation, is when you have 16 to 28 or 17 to 25 students, is this realistic? I mean, how can you, the individual in that classroom, personalize learning for those kids that are in front of you? Is it realistic? And that's what we talk about.
They teach each other though as well. Sometimes they'll say, I don't know how to do this, and we'll say, well, this person is an expert in this. They're willing to help you with it, so you can go to them. And also sometimes when they say, well, I don't know what to do, if you simply say to them, well, I trust your decision making, what do you think you need to do? I trust you. Try it. Go ahead. And giving them that comfort. As everybody has been saying, it's about the relationships and letting them know that it's not, oh, I care about you. It's that you really care about them, and building an environment where there's trust and students willing to take risks. They teach each other. So
Right, and having those larger numbers also allows you to have those small groups and those small pockets that say, okay, these 4 children are working on that, and these 8 students want to focus this way. So it's no longer that whole class and we all have to learn the same thing at the same time, and that was actually more difficult, having a bigger number, because you have all these different brains working in different ways. If you have 30 children in the classroom and you can have 5 groups of 6, or, you know, and it doesn't have to be that perfect mathematical equation, but when you have those smaller groups that are targeted, and I think that we see that in the lower grades and up through, you know, middle school and high school.
Okay.
I'll
say also that the technology is a huge help in that regard. So, for example, I teach an AP English rhetoric class, and rather than having students just do typical summer reading, they needed to actually, well, they still needed to read, but then they needed to create a video. And they decided on what was the most effective device that the author used in his or her writing, and then argue how it was effective and use evidence. So this is just a 2-minute video. So literally on the very first day of school, they arrive, and I ask them, please post your video here, and it goes to a spot. It's a shared document, so all students have access to it. So then you can see all of the video links and the name of the student, and then the homework for that evening might be choose any 2 links that you'd like, and talk about how they deepened your understanding of literature or author's craft or whatever it might be. So the technology is an enormous help. I mean, I will say the choice it's messy when you're offering more choice, and you do have to be creative, and you do have to cede some control, but it's worth it in the end.
So something teachers kept bringing up today too were playlists or choice boards. These are a super helpful, easy tool to get that to work. The teachers create a document from the standards, and create a learning goal for that assignment, that document. The students choose how they want to learn that goal, whether it's a paper article, a video, hands-on exploration, something on the computer, computer simulation, a lab, whatever it is. They choose how they want to learn. There are checkpoints to ask them, did you fully understand the learning target from the media or the source that you chose? And that checkpoint helps them with the reflection. Reflection 2 asks them that choice, the media choice that you chose, whether it was a video or an article, was that best for you? Did that help you fully understand the learning goal for the day? And as a teacher, I can frequently check in with their work, since a lot of this is digital. I can check in, circulate physically as well, and see who really doesn't understand the learning goal, who maybe needs a little help understanding the source that they chose, and I can pull those kids, direct instruct those children who need the support either in the moment or at night. I'll check, and the next day pull a group to help them reflect or direct instruct. So it really helps me pull students who really just need to sit down and go through the choices that they need. Personally, I feel like it's better, you're forced to pay attention when you're one-on-one with someone or three-on-one with someone versus being in a group, a whole class, where you can easily just turn off and not focus. So this is, I think, an easy way that I've used it with my kids, and I see them all meeting expectations at one point because of this. Katelyn,
I just want to clarify for the parents too. Personalized learning it's not design your own adventure.
It's
And
not a free-for-all.
It's not,
by any means.
and especially when we have larger classes, personalized learning does not come without a lot of community building and with a lot of time and effort and failure and trial and error on our part. The definition from the district, it says it's a teacher-facilitated process that provides each student with meaningful choices guided by a standards-based curriculum. And of course, at the beginning of the year, we need to take that time to build the community. The students need to understand the expectations. We set the tone. They get used to the level of rigor that we are delivering. They learn each other. So there's a lot of trust and there's a lot of structure that's put in place so that the students can then take ownership with responsibility. And then we just...
So I want to, because there's a lot that's, hopefully you're hearing some elements and answers to your questions, but I just want to make sure that so that you touched on technology, and someone mentioned, we have 75 plus tools, which is on the infographic, and you can certainly see those on the website, we can provide that link. And some are content providers in the sense that there's standards-based content in there that the teachers pull from to create playlists or students can access. And then some are just part of the infrastructure. So if anyone wants to elaborate further, like what is the role of technology, that has had a chance to say, the role of technology in the classroom. So we'll start with Jen and then maybe someone else.
I can speak to that. We do use iPads, but again, it's a tool to enhance their learning. And for me, it's a way that I can monitor that large group of students and their own tasks. So for example, one of the main tools I use is Seesaw, and Seesaw allows the children to take a photograph or a video of what they're working on, and then they voice record their thinking towards that. So I don't have to be with every student at the same, and listen to them. I can listen to it later, but they're still exploring their learning and telling me what they're learning, and I'm able to see where in their little 5-year-old brains they want to go next with what they're learning and help design them through the curriculum and their goals with that piece of technology. So I use it as a tool to communicate with me and each other.
And it's also a guided choice, right? So if you're working on a math particular strand, you're going to give them the certain apps that will apply to that, and therefore they've got some choice on how they want to access it, but it's a guided choice.
And so that's the intersection of standards with the technology.
Correct.
And if anyone else wants to add to that.
And in a math setting, using iExcel, as a teacher, I'm able to highlight certain standards with the yellow color tool, and the children know that they have a choice within their menu, but they need to stay within those yellow guides. So so I can then guide their choices to make appropriate ones for them. And as it was so well said, creating that environment of self-advocacy is so important in the beginning, so they can take risks and let me know, or a colleague or a friend know that they don't get it. They know who to go to. They know each other very well in my room because of that, and they do help each other, and that helps me.
We also use educations. Sometimes I record myself solving a problem that I've taught them, in math in particular, and it's actually a video recording of me solving the problem the same way that I taught them. So if they need a refresher, if they don't want to, if I'm working with someone and they don't want to interrupt, they know they can go to a video and see, okay, this is how it's done when we go back and try it again. They also use it to show their learning, and they record themselves teaching others how to solve problems. So we don't just use it as a, just, yes, we use IXL, yes, we use Dreambox, yes, we use ST Math for a portion of the day, but it's more of another tool that they use to display their learning versus just getting learning from the device.
So I know screen time is a question, right? And it's something we're all asking. And there's research all the time. There's a new research study that just came out by the National Institutes of Health. But they're still analyzing the impact, and if there is an impact, whether it's positive or negative. But what I can tell you, and you can also share, I think we try to put screen time or the tools that they're using in at least 4 buckets of, like, are students engaging in something? So what are they engaging in, whether it's to build their background knowledge or even just learning or researching? Then tools are meant to personalize. So are some of these tools personalized to them so that it's adaptive in some way, or is personalized to them, as you said, specific standards they need to work on, or a need to solve a certain problem? We use tools to measure. So some of the tools that we have in our toolbox are meant to measure progress. How are we doing? How is that working for us? So we have some assessment tools that are built, but they're meant to be quick, right? Quick dipsticks to understand where they are. Or IXL actually does that, measure and say, here's your accomplishment and here's where you are and where you need to go. And then create, you touched on create. So a lot of the tools are meant for students to choose to create through those particular tools. And Educations is one of those district power apps, if you will, because you can screencast, so you can actually capture what you're drawing and manipulating. You can overlay it with pictures. You can record your own voice. And what I was thinking when Sandra was speaking, the power behind having it as a teacher tool is because the students are listening to the learning from their own teacher's voice instead of some AI or someone else's voice from someplace else, or just Sal Khan. It's actually Sandra Grandinetti, and it's just more meaningful when the child in that classroom is hearing their teacher speak. I have pushed them a little bit and said, maybe ask your husband or another friend to get the male voice recorded too, because I think those boys want to hear from a male voice. But again, so I think that's what we try to do. That's our intention, is that we use the tools to engage, we use the tools to personalize, to measure, and to create. It is not a substitution. So hopefully you're listening carefully and hearing what they're saying, that it is not all day, all the time, 6 hours, 4 hours. A day. The other thing I want to add, because it was a question, there are tools that we have made a commitment to that we've identified and vetted as ones that are going to have an impact on achievement. So you've heard ST Math and Dreambox a lot since 2016. There's been meta-analyses done that say that if we do this, there's a common effect, there's an impact. So we did make a district decision that at least a minimum of 20 minutes, at least 3 times a week. Now, Dreambox and ST Math say more, but no, this is what we want, because we know that if students are devoted to that time within there during that time block, it's going to have an impact on their ability or their achievement ultimately through other measures or creation. So there are some, yes, we use the guided research that program, that vendor has done for us, because there's something to be said about that nationally, and we would, and we did share that.
And Dreambox and ST Math also alert the teacher if a child is working on a particular skill and they're having difficulty with it, or they've made X number of attempts and they're still not successful. It alerts the teacher, and that's when it's a teaching tool for us. We'll go over and work on it together. Show me what you're doing with this. How can we solve it? Let me teach you this. So it's not something that they are just in front of a screen. First of all, I find nobody wants to be like, none of the kids want to be like that. They all want to be engaging, talking, interacting with each other, so it's hard to get them to just want to be in front of a screen. It's not what we're doing it for.
So I'm going to throw out another question, and maybe I'll start at the high school level, maybe with Amy. The question is about, certainly there's grade level standards, right? We have an obligation that the students have an opportunity to access learning to meet those standards, right? But how do you intersect that with this need for advancement? How do you, again, grade level standards, but then that opportunity to enrich and advance?
I mean, you see it, others have touched upon this, the need for advancement, versus the student's own interest. And I've always found, that, in the research class, I do teach chem, so I do have that area where, it is standardized based and you have to sort of fit in personalized learning with things that you need to accomplish. And that is difficult because you're still dealing with standards, but you still have to pull in the interests of the students. So that requires a lot of meeting, a lot of talking, a lot of communications, and a lot of building, of relationships. But in the research class, I always tell the kids that if you start with your interests and you are motivated by those interests, all the things that you sort of suck in along the way, and I know this is it's unique, but all the things that you suck in along the way will build all of those skills that you eventually need to capture. It really is a self-fulfilling process. I tell them all the time, the successes that you've seen always start with hard work, and I can guarantee you, if you have the interest and you do the hard work, something good will happen. If you don't, nothing will happen. It really, that happens throughout, so I hope that sort of answers the question. It really, if you can get, we're talking about technology and talking about use and hours. The key to me is to get the kids interested so that they really are coming in and they're thinking and they're showing interest and they're pushing the process. And then all the other stuff sort of takes care of itself, at least in my room.
So there was a question, and so piggyback on that. What about students that aren't good at self-direction or self-motivation? What do you do?
You do, the idea in this arena is really to give the kids confidence. So I do have those few kids that really struggle. The hardest part of doing independent study, of doing self-driven learning, is to really sometimes for the kids to realize what are my interests. Maybe I'm not a great scientist, but I have other interests in things that science touches everything. It really does. Sure.
That was my question. I really directed it at that end of the table.
We'll get there.
Okay.
The idea is to really give the kids confidence in small successes in the process, in the scientific process, whether it's at high school or middle school or elementary school. I don't really think it matters. And once they feel like they can drive, they can build this process on their own, and everything sort of opens up, at least at the high school level.
And I'd like to get to the question, but I think also, especially at the high school level, that means, I'm not going to say lower the stakes because that implies that you're lowering your standards, but giving them an opportunity to